So welcome to World Childless Week, everyone. Well, it's not World Childless Week at the moment, but it will be when you see this. I'm Michael Hughes. I'm a third of the Full Stop podcast, World Childless Week champion, and I'm joined today by three of my brothers from other mothers, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So how about we go first to Rob?
Hi, my name is Robin Hadley. I'm a mediated childless man, I guess. I was desperate to be a dad, particularly in my 30s, and I didn't become a dad for a whole range of reasons: economic, partner choice. And in my 30s, I was really broody. I was desperate to be a dad. I was very jealous of men who were dads. And that stuck with me until my 40s, when I started training as a counsellor, and for a dissertation I looked at broodiness in men, and I found out there was really nothing about that. And I guess the core thing for me and my research from then has been, was I the only one who felt like that? Because it seemed to be I was the only one feeling really desperate to be a dad. And now I found out I'm not the only one. It is out there, it is common. So you're not alone in your feelings of anger and depression and moods and not quite knowing how to behave or what to say. There's lots of men like that. The issue is there's no real social narrative for us to follow on that. And this is one great thing about World Childless Week and about the Clan of Brothers. It gives us narratives, things to say, things to express, and makes it normal for us to do that.
School, how about you go next?
All right. Okay. I was on mute. Okay, now I've unmuted myself. Oh, I am Skumbuzo Dube, right from Zimbabwe in Africa. I've been in marriage for 10 years, and we've been trying to have a child, and this is our 11th year, and it has been a tough and difficult journey as a pastor who actually ministers to the church members who have children, and deals with those issues of some members who may not be knowing that you don't have a child, who will be coming, maybe requesting, Pastor, please pray for me so that I can have a child. And so those issues come to us as lost reminders. So I am a pastor. I'm also a healthcare chaplain, and I am interested in psychotherapy. And I've done my master's dissertation was dealing with the issue of the experiences of people who are involuntarily childless. And I was focusing on women, so to speak. And I enjoy writing, and I enjoy that as a way of expressing myself in issues of involuntary childlessness. That's it about me. I also blog. Okay, I also blog on my blog Shunem Care. That's where I express my feelings of anger, feelings of disappointment, and all those issues that take place when you are involuntarily childless.
Thanks, School. We'll get back to what you said a bit later on. And Andy, please.
Hi, I'm Andy. So I've been with my wife since I was 19. We're now now in 40. We've been married for 11 years. Forgetting where we are with the pandemic. And throughout the whole marriage, we were trying for children, unsuccessful IVFs, too many miscarriages to remember really, or to know. And it's been really tough to sort of reach to a point where there's no hope every month. That was the thing, I think, was, as we'll talk, I guess, as we go along, part of the denial was that somehow this month would be the one. And I think that's took a lot to accept it isn't. And there's questions around it, sort of, why didn't we start before we got married? We were living together for the 10 years before. So, yeah, it's a complicated journey. So I can understand why people wonder why men don't talk, because it's so messy. It's so hard to sometimes find the words to scripts, because for men, they aren't really out there. And I guess with the Clan of Brothers, with the Men Matter 2 I guess us guys, we're trying to create something for us, but also for other men to sort of understand what's going on for them. Outside of being childless, I'm a counsellor, but I don't counsel in this area. And I'm a PhD student, and I'm sort of starting to merge all my sort of interests. So I will be presenting on sort of a day's walking and how childlessness was reflected in landscapes and can be untherapeutic. Not just being in nature is good for us, but it can also be really difficult for us if we don't own our emotions. So perhaps something to discuss more later, but I guess it's that thing of what works for us sometimes isn't always the best thing either in terms of dealing with our emotions. But perhaps I've just dived in quite deep there for an introduction.
Oh, look, so the guys have mentioned the Clan of Brothers. So for those out there who are not quite sure what that is, it's a group that we've started to welcome childless men who have accepted that they won't be fathers. And as I think it was Kevin Riley actually said, it's a place to belong. And I think that's the best way that the best way we can explain it is it's a place to belong. And if you wish to express your emotions, there are men there that are extremely compassionate and empathetic, because they have been through what you may have. And we come from all gamuts of childlessness. But it's a closed group, and we like it that way because, again, it's a place to belong, and we only want people in there who understand our issues. So I brought the boys together along because as I immerse myself into our community, I realise there's a lot of females that find it really hard to understand the behaviour of their partners. And so I've tried to get, and I would like to say these gentlemen here are very brave, because there are a lot of men that would not do this, and we also want to show some leadership. It's okay to express yourself if you need to. So what I want to throw to you, to all three of you, is a conversation that my wife and I had in that when we were going through our worst, our most dark times, she said to me some years later, why did I never see you grieve? Because I felt so alone. Within our marriage, my wife felt alone because she didn't think I cared, because she didn't see me grieving. So I would like to throw that out to you guys. Andy, you're not on mute, so would you like to sort of give me your thoughts around that? That'll teach you for not putting on your mute button.
It will. It's because I'm on an iPad, so you'll see my finger stretch like ET otherwise. So with us, I can understand, why your wife asked that of you. I think it wasn't quite as sharply defined for me and my wife, but she was certainly grieving, processing, moving towards acceptance a lot quicker than I was. And I felt lost when it wasn't happening, but it was from mates or brothers. Both of our brothers, we only got one each. But I just didn't know really what to do, because in another way, her desire to have a family was there quicker than for me. Like, we'd got married, we said we'll try for kids now, and I was worried about providing, about finances, but we tried anyway, and I needn't have worried about all that. But I think not being on the same page at the start meant my grief process was behind hers, and so we were definitely at different stages. And also for her, it was tears. It was obvious when she was upset, but for me, it was anger, and I could snap at saying of a driver when driving, or cooking if I knocked something, or just silly things that would set it off, but weren't the anger. There wasn't about that. It was clearly about other stuff, mainly the childlessness. And because that both upset me and her, I then hid that, because I was like, I don't want to be anger. So I'd sort of just be quiet or talk about other stuff, or it somehow just didn't get really dealt with, which was unhealthy. And yet, we did have our moments of talking about it. I did have my moments of expressing it. And when I wrote a lot of journaling, and I did a few pieces that went public. And in them, there isn't the anger except in one piece. It's much more about the loss, the sadness, about the unfairness, the puzzlement. And it's much more like perhaps how she was grieving. And that almost felt more private to write it down and send it out to the world, because I wasn't there when someone interacted with it. So I can see if they didn't hear it, didn't connect with it. Because where in person, I think with my wife it was fine because she got it, but with family, with friends, the spaces weren't there to really discuss it, or they didn't get it. Or if they were there, it was like at midnight after far too many pints. So then it wasn't really a useful conversation. And so yeah, I think I was grieving. It was just in a very different way. And I think perhaps because childlessness it's got more women there, and more their way of expressing it. Could be that almost our way of grieving is unseen and isn't quite understood. And that we do share emotion, it's just perhaps not the same way. And that gets difficult for us if the ways we show it get shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. School. What are your thoughts on this? In terms of your grieving process, was it something you kept close to yourself, or did you manage to sort of deal with it at the time?
The grieving process basically was determined by my cultural lenses. When we were raised, we were taught as men not to cry. Boys don't really cry, and so because of that, if you are somebody who is seen to be crying, you are not man enough. You are not standing by the side of your wife, and so that really hits you very hard. But inside you will be bleeding, and there will be this. The anger will be there, the pain will be there, but just because you need to man up, and boys don't cry. See, boys don't cry, and that is a problem. So that's one thing that has been a challenge in this journey. That the expectation is that you are supposed to be strong, but the circumstances that will be surrounding you won't be allowing you to be that strong. The moment you cry, the moment you shed tears, you become a source of pain to the one that is supposed to receive your comfort. And in my case, it will be my wife who is supposed to receive my comfort. So the moment I begin to cry, I will be like hurting her. So it will be easier for me to look for a certain place, I mean, maybe a secluded places to cry, to shed tears. And so we've had a number of surgeries, and I've been saying to her, I understand we need a child. I understand this is very important that we get a child. But there's something more that I wish your help was a little bit more better, because you've been going surgery after surgery, trying this and that, and it doesn't really get down well with me. For me, it is more important that you get better than getting a child. And so when you say that, that thing is maybe kind of creates some sense that maybe this guy doesn't really care about this thing. So that is another challenge, that a crossroad that we come to as men, to really cry, to really express our feelings. It's considered feminine. It's not something that is masculine. If you are a man, you are supposed to man up. So the grieving process has been stalled and has been difficult because of this cultural lens that we put on as we come to a grieving situation.
Mm. Hey, so Rob, what about you? What are your thoughts on that, the men's grieving process? You know, what was yours like?
Well, I think it's still ongoing, because I think it dips in and out depending on what's happening. I think when I was really broody in my mid-30s, then it just consumed me, that desire and feeling of failure, of not being on time, of being different and being off track. And there was anger there, as Andy said. And there's something around that about action. I think we're conditioned to fix things as men in cultures, to go out and do things. So we almost, hate to say it, programmed to be active outside ourselves. And I guess women, we're talking very broad brushstrokes here, are conditioned to be at home with the internal process, whereas we're conditioned not to be like that, to actually go and fix things. And we can't fix, really, not being a dad. And we can't fix our partners if they're going through infertility treatment, or we're going through infertility treatment and it's not successful. So that each reminder of not being is a point of grief. And that can just be a little point, and you can find that's not a problem. Otherwise, it can just fill you up and fill your whole view and sense of being. So I think with age, because I'm 60, I know you can't believe it, but I am. And you think I'm older, thanks. There's something about that gives a bit of distance, but also the chances of me becoming a dad, because I'm married in a stable relationship, I want to stay in it, there's very little chance of me becoming a dad. So there's that sort of logical element to it, but there's also a feeling element that actually I am missing out here, and it's a missing is part of the grief. I think what Andy and Sibukuzu was saying was so accurate about the culture, and actually there's something missing in culture for men and how they express their internal emotions, what's acceptable and what isn't. I mean, what we're saying is we're booking that trend. For me, what I've noticed is when I'm really struggling with something, I go and usually dig a hole in the garden and start doing some gardening. And there is something about physical activity as a process. So Andy was saying about walking. There's something about doing that. And is that natural? Is that just in with us as men, or is it cultural that actually we're channeling what we've been conditioned to be into an acceptable form? Yes, yeah, I think that's where I've gone. Sorry.
Yes, yeah. I remember when Jodie Day and I, well, she encouraged me to try and start a group. That's what she did. And I said, well, I'm not quite sure it's going to work because men, we're action oriented, we are action orientated. We need to be doing things. And we as guys, actually, I think we bond through that. So if I said to you guys, come round on Saturday, I'll have a barbie, but I need your help building something. You'd come over, give you some direction, and that's how we would bond through, doing something. And then Barbie and a few beers afterwards, again, doing something. But so, yeah, it was a little bit, I wasn't quite sure, but I think, like you said, we need to buck the trend because, guys need somewhere to express that grief that we've now all talked about, which is quite private. And I think that was me. That's why I never showed emotion because, like school said about that cultural lens, I found that the only way that I could get through the dark time was to get on with it. I remember having a conversation with Rod Silvers, and that's one of the things he said. He just said, just got to get on. That's the way I dealt with it. You just got to get on with it. And that's the way I saw it, was we just got to keep going, quick, work through this. And so I saw emotion as something that got in the way of that. Whereas now, I think in my 50s, I'm grieving now. And like you say, Rob, it comes and it goes. I thought that I'd had it under control. And then in 2018, when we had a trip over to the UK and went to Fertility Fest for the first time, and I had the opportunity to go to Ireland. And I'll insert a picture when I edit this. That really, I thought it was great, but it smacked me on the head like a baseball bat. We went to a grave of another Michael Hughes because I'm the sixth Michael Hughes. There's my dad, his dad, his dad, and his dad. And one of my dad's cousins took me to the grave of the one that we think may have been the first one, 1800 and something. So there I was, standing on the grave of this Michael Hughes, the sixth generation of, and it all stops with me. There is no more. And that hit me like it threw me in a way that I could never imagine it could. And it's actually still hard to look at that photograph. So I just hope when people look at this, it's not any great piece of art, but when you look at this, there is so much behind this photograph. So like you say, it comes and it goes, and I think that's another thing we could probably discuss, is about how we manage that. How do we, because I think it is something that you're always going to live with it, and it's sort of about how you manage it, how you deal with it. Some of us do it well, and some of us don't. What about you, Andy? How do you manage?
To start with, it was very much on my own. So either writing or running, both doing things. Writing, there is more being with the emotion. But it was also removed because when I did share the writing, as I was saying, I wasn't there to be met. So I've been lucky that I've not had negative feedback. I've had positive, and I've connected with other childless people through it. So that's been really good. But while it helps, I think there's a disconnection with the written word rather than, say, us guys talking now, where I could feel a real sort of punch to the stomach when you talked about that gravestone and the Michael Who's and the stopping. And with the writing, there is that there, but it's not quite the same, but it is really helpful to do for me. And then the running was even more removed in the sense of, I find this with anything when I run. I have something in my head, and after a mile, that's gone. So it's good in a sense of grounding me, in the sense of not being lost in the grief, in a sense of being active, trying to move through it, so I'm not just in a lost, dark place and lose any sense of time and sort of purpose. But again, I'm not necessarily with the emotions. And I'm part of a running group. I nearly said it was because not ran this year really with them because of the pandemic. But it's a fell running group, and it's almost like some people knew about the childlessness because I've been in and out of the group because the process is in and out, as you guys have said. But at times it did feel like it was an elephant on the fells, that it's difficult being around other people if I wasn't in quite a good spot or if I didn't feel fit enough. And I think it goes back to that cultural lens of that Skew was saying, that we can't be weak if we're men. And showing emotion, being upset is equated with weakness, which is wrong, because it isn't. And so, yeah, if I wasn't feeling fit, I sort of felt more of a failure. It plugged into the grief that I'm already failed here, I'm less of a man, something like that. And so the ways of coping were useful, but they didn't quite help enough, if you like. They were good enough to get by, but not necessarily to grow, to move forward in a positive, purposeful direction. And the thing that I found to help with that is meeting people, is finding a place to belong, as Kevin put it, in the sense of through Twitter, through Facebook, and now through the Clan of Brothers, and having spaces where you can talk about childlessness, but you can also talk about hobbies or music or cricket, and just know that you're not going to be triggered, that you don't have to hold yourself tight, hold yourself tense, that there's going to be a question about kids or someone's going to bring up what their son's done, etc., etc. And that's nice because you get to connect about it, but you also get just to relax and be, and not to be on guard. And that is so exhausting. And so I think long term, writing and running will stay a part of it. But I think the real healing for me will be belonging to groups, connecting through these Zoom calls, through messages, and hopefully at some point in person with you guys. I think that's the way forward for me.
No, nice one. School. What about you? How do you cope? What's your secret?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. When Rob was speaking, he touched something that was that's really resonated with me. There are so many things that remind us, and even Andy spoke about that, and Mike, you also spoke about going to the grave and thinking that you are the last Michael Hughes, and that's something. For me as a pastor, there's something that's unavoidable that I should do. When children are born, there is a service where they are brought to the church maybe for the first time. And when they are brought to the church for the first time, they are supposed to be dedicated. And that dedication service is a trigger that I can't avoid. And it is a painful trigger to remember that you are blessing these children, but you don't have a child of your own. One day, a little girl aged 9 came to me, and I was pastoring a different congregation, and she had not seen my child. And she came to me and said, Pastor, there's something that I want to ask you. And say, what is it? And she says, where is your child? And says, no, I don't have any child. I don't have any. And she was so disturbed about that. And she said, oh, Pastor, I will pray for you. I will definitely pray for you. So even little children can actually notice that. And to me, that struck as a loss, a reminder that I have lost parenthood. When you have lost parenthood. So my fallback plan is to say, when I have done this, when a loss reminder comes, I just get down and I do poetry. I write a poem. About the situation that I was exposed to at that moment. And I also maybe blog about it. At one time, in my culture, when you are without a child, and maybe I need to explain this so that you understand, when you are without a child and you die, in my culture, it still happens in some places, but in some places, because of civilization, it no longer happens. You are buried together with a rat to show the societal displeasure. They will throw the rat will be tied to your back so that they show that you have discontinued the line of growth, the line of development. You have curtailed it. And so at one time I heard this, and somebody was talking about it, and it came to my ears. And then to really get over that situation, I wrote a poem, I'm more important than a rodent. I'm more important than a rodent. So the poetry that I do is affirming myself that I'm more important than a rodent. You could consider me as somebody who will be buried with a rat, but I'm more important than that kind of a thing. So writing to me has been a way that has really helped me to cope with the situation, even if I am not yet over with this thing. I understand that one time or the other, sometimes I'm up and sometimes I am down. And the other aspect, I went into academic research on this very phenomenon. I've been following Rob in his academic researches, and they bless my soul very well. And they really resonate with what I am going through. Like the one that I can't go to the pub. Anyway, I don't drink, but I can't go to the pub. That research really spoke to the essence, the real me. It was like the men that were talking there are like me. So academic research has also been another way of channeling the grief and the pain that I am going through.
Just before we pass over to Rob, what we'll do is we'll get all your links. So the link for your blog, school, yours, Andy, and I know you're building a new website, Rob. So we can put that there so people can follow up if anything triggers their interest after this. So Rob, what about you? Cope apart from digging holes in the ground.
Digging holes everywhere, socially, economically, wherever I go, I'm digging a hole. That was so touching, Stu, really was. And thank you. You know what? I've lost the point. What?
How do you cope?
How do I cope? Okay.
What do you do to cope?
Thank you. Well, I think coping changes with time and experience. I think when I was younger, I didn't really cope. I did those things of fight or flight. I'm just going to go off a bit now. I know a lot of women say their partner doesn't talk to me. He won't sit and listen and express himself. And if we take that thing about fight, freeze and flight, men are sort of conditioned to fight or flight, so it's action oriented. To be frozen is like the worst place, the most vulnerable thing for a man. And the big thing about men is they don't like to be seen to be vulnerable. And when you're sitting on a one-to-one conversation with your loved one, and she's saying, "What are you feeling?" can feel very trapped for a man, because to reach down and actually express everything that's there, like a volcano inside you. Part of the fear is actually you will explode like a volcano, and that might be like an anger, but actually the lava of emotion will come out and burn the partner away and destroy everything around. So rather than risk that, why not go out as a protective measure? Self-protection and protection for the other would be one of the things that, and I think I did that when I was in my late 30s. Where I met Marianne, my wife, and she was in London, I was in Manchester, and one particular time, just moved into a house, I was decorating, doing wallpapering, can't stand that process, I'm useless at it. I say this before the world, I'm making myself vulnerable. Ironing and wallpapering, for me, they're for the next world, okay? Save them up, I'll do them then, not for this world. And she phoned me up, and that day my friend and my colleague at work had announced that he was going to be a dad, and I was terribly jealous about that, and I was coming back and having to do this wallpapering, and she said, you know, what's up, you don't sound very happy. And I went, I just terribly want to be a dad. And because of her situation, she went, well, you know, that can't be with me. So you've got your choice there. I'm condensing a lot of conversations down to one line there. And at that time, at 38, 39, I sort of looked at myself, you know, I'm in an okay job, but I'm not a go-ahead guy. Where would I go to find a partner? Who would want me? What am I bringing to the table? And with somebody I really love and really care about, what am I going to do? So there's a choice there, but also no choice at the same time. So the coping for me came with sort of a muted or negotiated acceptance. There's a balance, a mediation, like I said, a mediated childless man, a mediation between actually what I want on the inside and feel for and the outer world and where I'm at. And it's negotiating that inner and outer of being that is a struggle. So how do I cope now? Well, I did my research on it. I did my MAM, my MSc, my PhD, all about male childlessness and men's experience, because you can go in the biological and the sociological, which are all stats and it's all very scientific, but actually where are men's voices? Where are men's experiences? What are they feeling? What do they do? And that's one reason why we're here, is to supply that knowledge and those experiences so other people can understand. And that in doing that, we are making ourselves vulnerable, but it's for a greater good, which in a way is very masculine, is to spend the self for the greater good. So what do? I do dig holes in the garden. I write as well. And there is some psychological theory and around why men do that, and that is a form of action. So I often say, you look at men and you just imagine a concrete plug here inside, and that's blocking the emotions. And so the psychological paper, counseling paper I've read says that action-orientated therapy works better for men. Writing, drawing, doing things. And that sort of fits in with how they've been brought up. So writing, in a way, is outside the body because you're using your head and you're mediating and making it safe for your reader. This is what I feel, and that might be a real volcano inside, but actually to make it so I don't flood and damage you, I'll say it in this way and I'll explain it in this way, or I'll paint, or I'll do poetry. So I do a little bit of poetry myself, but not very much. I do the writing, and I've written a book now, and I do things like this. So I think there's something about channeling grief to have a positive effect. Not that it works all the time, and sometimes I'm just very, very sad by different things. I cry a lot more as I get older, but I think a lot of men do.
Yeah, you do.
They get,
I've found that.
Yeah. So maybe that imposition of a distance when we were younger between what's inside and what our social selves are being reduces down. And that may well be down to there's not as much risk for you as you're older, but also maybe it's also time's knocking on as well. I can't afford not to be emotional at that time. So I hope that helps. I think I've whittled on a bit.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh, maybe that's why I started my blog. I've always been a slow learner. But yeah, one of the things that Vicky said to me because I used to write it. It's now ghost written by Vicky. You know, she'll edit and suggest. But I found that quite therapeutic. You know, and I've never been a writer. I've never been that sort of person. I played rugby as growing up and into my 30s. That's another story. And that was always me. It was to channel that into rugby. So that was my way of getting rid of all that. Like Andy goes through, your first mile, and then whatever's in your mind you forget about. For me, it was rugby, because you're absolutely smashed after you get off the rugby field. But one of the other things it showed was that cultural lens that Sick was talking about, where, on the rugby field, you got to get up. You get hit. You got to get back up, and you got to keep going. You've got to show that you can't show those vulnerabilities. So so I've never been academic, even though I'm surrounded by academics right here. So I know exactly where you're coming from, and so I've now lost my train of thought, Rob. So where are we going to go to next? Oh, crying, and I find crying as well. I don't think I can get through a bloody podcast without crying. It's and it amazes me, because I don't set out to be that way, and then all of a sudden it creeps up on you. And I must admit, I'm one of those people that try to keep it down, keep it under control, because I don't know what it will look like if I let it out of control. So yes, right. Where are we off to next? I'm just reading my notes. Don't forget I can edit this out, this bit. Okay. All right, so we've been going for an hour, and we might lose the interest of some people. So one other thing, I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet at the moment. So we're going across subjects now, but the last podcast we did was on aging without children, and I'm caring for my parents right now. My dad has dementia. My mum has just had a heart attack, and so she needs care. And the mess that they've, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but to try and administer their affairs has been quite trying, because over the years it's got quite complex, and I've had to try and wade through that, but also wade through the government care system. And it's just it really shows that as they lose their mental capacity, they don't have that wherewithal to actually make decisions. Like my mum can't even make a decision anymore. Obviously my dad can't, because he's got dementia. And it's really made me think about what does that mean for me? What does that mean for Vicky? What does that mean for us both as we age? And is this a fear? Is this something you guys have thought about? I know you have, Rob, because you're well into this. But mostly to Andy and School is, what are your thoughts on aging as a childless person? Have you been exposed to this thought around, I'll have no one to help me when I get older? Or is it something you've not thought about? I know I sprung it on you because I didn't put that in the notes about this meeting, but what are your thoughts, Andy?
It's not something I thought of a lot, to be honest. So just entering my 40s has also been a sort of similar time to really accepting the dream of children is over. And so I think legacy is like a next step in terms of that will come at some point in terms of the process and the grief. But realizing that we won't have children, it's hit me in a sense of things to pass on. So I buy vinyl to listen to my music on. And I'm like, part of me is like, why do I do it when you can hear it just as well on Spotify, say? And I was like, well, it's for me. It's what I do. But I always thought also that I would pass my music on to my children. My love of it. Hopefully they'd play instruments better than me. They could be in the band I never was, without living through them as well. But there was a sense of the music, I collect it and it will go to someone. So it sort of shocks me to think that at some point it could all end up in the skip. Hopefully it'll end up in something like Oxfam. But there's that sense of legacy of like the music, the books, the writings, our home, that will just disappear. It'll probably go to our nieces, but it feels really sad that there isn't someone really connected to. Maybe in time we'll connect more to our nieces. There is a distancing for me with my brother. We're at opposite ends of the country. But it feels tough that, because legacy I know is there's people in the future to care for you, but it's also people talk of, oh, I got this from my granddad, it's something they hold, it's really important memento, and it's like, that's not going to happen. No one's going to quite see the joy of this battered 99p album I got from a charity shop and really get it. And in a way, I think your children are your best hope of that, because you'll have spent time with them if they shared your interest. And it's, so only in that way in terms of what I leave behind. And then, so I've swung between, why am I doing it? I should just listen digitally. And then going, well, what else am I spending the money on? Why not treat myself? Why not give myself that self-care? And I don't know about the future in terms of aging without kids. I think perhaps I'm just not in that space yet. I'm a counsellor. I've gone back to being a student doing a PhD. I don't feel 40 in some ways. But I also feel more mature than I was in my 20s when I did my first degree. And so maybe, yeah, in time it will shift to sort of that legacy to parents not being well or needing more support. At the moment, both our parents are okay. But it will, yeah, I don't know really how I feel about it at the moment.
Oh, that's fine. It's actually quite interesting. It might even be sort of a, that I'm finding it very hard to get people switched on to it. And I think it's not until you've experienced, looking after someone that you've actually sort of get switched on. And so I think it's really interesting to hear the way that you're, it's not something you thought about as someone in your 40s. So it's actually food for me. What about you, School? What do you see as a is it a Zimbabwean or
Yes.
So
yes.
So as you age, how will life pan out for a person who doesn't have a family support network around them? I know this is depressing, but I've got a baby bonnet at the moment.
Yeah, that's another difficult question, so to speak. That really bothers one as he thinks about what will happen, who will keep me, and all those things. They really come to mind. And as I'm looking at my parents, there also I really resonate with what Mike has said on my parents are. My mother-in-law is down. She's Parkinson's disease, and it's deteriorating every day. And my dad as well has got some health challenges that are. So when I look at that and I say, okay, I can be able to help my parents now, but now when I get to that stage, what exactly is going to happen? So that really becomes a problem because I am seeing what is happening to my dad, and I'm seeing what is happening to my mother-in-law, and so this really comes hard on my grieving process, because it really becomes another punch in the holes that I already have. So it adds to the pain that I already have. And there's the word Andy spoke about. The word is a very common one at this side of the world, the word legacy. Legacy is a very, very important element. What legacy are you going to leave behind? It is not the poems that I will be writing. It's not the books that I will be writing. It's not the maybe the songs. I do write children's songs. When I'm gone, what will happen? I mean, who is going to get that legacy? That becomes a real problem. So that's one thing that maybe needs to be reauthored in my mind as I look at aging without children. Yep.
Thanks, School. So, Rob, I know you're big into this. So, what's your thoughts around this?
Sit back, lads. Strap in. We're in for a long, long ride. Right, aging without children. Well, I think you've all touched on it in that really people don't usually understand their social care systems in their country till they access them, and particularly in later life. And in the UK, because we've got the NHS, and that's supposed to look after you from cradle to grave, a lot of people, when they get older, are suddenly confronted with a system that isn't that simple, and in fact is very, very complex about how, if you own your house, how much you can pay towards your care. It's a massive, complex thing, a metaphor for which I can't drag out at the moment. But it's as complex as something that's very, very complex. And aging without, a lot of the issue for aging without children is they're not represented in policy. And if you're not in policy, you don't count. And if you don't count, you really aren't counted at all. So a lot of policy is evidence-based. That goes down to stats. So for men in stats, we know, every country in the world, in fact, knows how many women don't have children because they count how many women do have children. So it's a pretty easy sum to do, even for me, and I'm terrible at stats. However, we don't, most countries, with the exception of Norway, hooray, Stats Norway, don't collect the same data on men. What we can say is there's more childless men than there are childless women. And in every single country, I think, more or less, that goes throughout the life course. So who is going to look after you when you're older? One of the things about becoming older, no matter how positive spin people put on it, our bodies start to fail. Things go wrong. Luckily for me, I've kept my looks. Hey, that's just me. I'm sorry, it's not you.
You're a lucky man, Rob. You're a lucky man.
Pass it on to you, I would, but you know, I have really lost the thread now. Being funny has thrown me.
Aging without children.
Without children, yes. So what happens is, because you're not counted in the stats, you don't appear in policy, and therefore health and social care don't see you as a problem because you're not there. But it is a problem in reality. If you go into residential care, there's lots of people who are aging without children, and that includes people who do have children. Because if there's been a split in the family, or the adult child lives in another country, or so far away that person is childless, that is an issue. I'll show how important family is in care of older people. In the UK, I think it's something like 85% of informal care is carried out by a family member, usually an adult child. So an adult child mediates between the individual and the state or whichever institution they're there. And in the UK, there's been quite a few over the past number of years of problems in institutions, mid-staff's health. There's a few going through now of how people are being treated in institutions, poorly treated. And it's the adult children who bring this up, who say, Mum or Dad died or has been not cared for in this way, and that changes that. If you're not got somebody to represent you, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a particular problem for men, I think, because of what we discussed before about men not expressing themselves. Men tend not to access healthcare at the same rate as women. They tend to access it late, and when things are more difficult to treat. So aging without children is really a big demographic and political problem actually down in the future. But trying to get the politicians and the administration to acknowledge it is an issue, because they just see it as a financial thing. They're just going to go, actually, if we look at this, how are we going to pay for it? How is this going to, what policy changes are we going to have to do? And sometimes it's easier not to look at a problem and hope it goes away of its own accord. And in this case, actually, the population just dies away anyway, and so it's not our problem. That's a very cynical view or very realistic view, whichever one of those ways you want to go to. So aging without children, it is an issue. And at 60, my lifespan, I think, statistically is I'm going to die probably at 75. I come from a working class background. I was born in Old Trafford, Manchester, heavy industrialised area. Had chest problems related to all the pollution as a youngster, but everybody did. Bronchitis used to be called the Manchester cough because everybody had it. It's a humid, damp place, heavy industry. Smog would last for 5 days. When I was a kid, 7 days, something like that. And when I see smog, you couldn't literally see I'm sounding like a really old man now, aren't I? In the old days, all this was fields. We had proper pollution then, not like this stuff now. You can breathe it. You could see our pollution. Let me see it.
And did you go to school barefoot?
Oh, barefoot luxury. Sorry. So, your class does affect your health. The poorer you are raised, the more chances are you'll have more health issues later on in life. So aging without children, it's a big thing for all countries. So if you look at Japan, for example, they're trying to put things in place there. I think, and I'm not going to go into different countries because I could really go on for a long, long time, and I'd be just throwing stats out, and that's not interesting to anyone, particularly me. I'm bored of myself, and I can cut this bit out, but my wife's cooking something, and I'm absolutely desperate to go and eat, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stick with you. If only this was smell-o-vision.
What's she cooking?
I don't know. Oh, I do, yes. Stilton cheesecake.
Oh, nice.
Very
upmarket.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I tell you what. So you can get and have some dinner. Actually, no. It'll be. Is it lunch?
Lunch. Yeah. Whatever. Food.
I can't do the time.
2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah.
So, look, I really want to thank you guys for having the courage to come on and do this. I think it'll be really great to enlighten the fairer sex, if you will, of the community. But also, I hope the fact that we've been able to have a chat, have a laugh, also shows to other men that, hey, it's okay. Listen to what we've all talked about. Come and join us at the Clan of Brothers, if you wish. It's a slow burn. We're all trying to figure out what it means for us. So it's not a full-on Facebook group, if you will. But is there anything you guys would like to add in terms of encouragement to other men, or speak to the fairer sex in terms of how to perhaps support their partners? How about you go first, Andy?
I think,
and don't forget, I can cut out all the silence as well, so don't worry about that. So if it takes a little bit of time to think of something that's cool,
that's fine. I was thinking for other men that it's knowing you're not alone. I think that was one of the tough things. And I've seen this mentioned on the Clan of Brothers, that it seems like everyone else is having kids when you're trying to have kids, or you're not in the right circumstances to have kids, it's happening around you. And so I think even if you come and join us at the Clan of Brothers, or you join some other Facebook groups, or you just sort of pop in and out at looking at this other world, that can help knowing you're not alone with this struggle. Even if you're not interacting in terms of sharing your own stuff, but just sort of watching, if you like, that could be a good sort of first step forward. And I'm just thinking of Robin when he says about that volcano and risking our vulnerability when someone says, how are you feeling? And it is such a big question. And I think, for me, I'm not quite sure how you break it down if that man is in a partnership, how a woman could ask in a way that allows the man to let off a bit of the steam, so it doesn't erupt, that volcano doesn't keep building. But I suppose in one way, if you're the man, because that's the bit you can control, you can't control your partner, is let off some of that steam yourself. Like, for me, writing and running helped with that. It's not my cure, it's not my healing, it's part of it. But I think it's just find somewhere to belong and find an activity, find some actions that allows that steam to come off. And so that if you do have those chats with your wife, your partner, then you're able to say something, even if it's just one or two sentences. You could say to yourself, I'm just going to say something for 1 minute and that's it. So you don't sort of feel like you've got to tell them everything. You can just say, I'll say one thing, and you could negotiate. It sounds a bit therapy-like, but you could negotiate with your wife, with your partner, in the sense of, you want to know how I'm feeling, I don't really know, or it's too risky for me, I can give you a few words, and it's a start, I guess. That's all. We're all trying to just find a way to be with this. That'd be, my idea.
No, thanks, Eddie. That was actually quite insightful. School. What about what advice have you got?
All right. Maybe speaking to the fairer sex, the women, the wives, they may need to really understand the way in which we grieve. And this is very important. Sometimes we are more reserved. They may find it difficult to come to terms with the way in which we grieve and think we are disconnected from their pain. So I'd love to emphasize that. And then to my fellow brothers who are in this childless journey, I just want to emphasize that we are very important in our situation, although we are defined by the losses that we incur. For instance, we are called childless because of the loss of parenthood. We are more important than the losses that we have. So a positive self-talk is very important in this regard. If we don't do that, nobody is going to do it for us. We've got to rise to the occasion and face the world and actually redefine the narrative and look at this issue more differently. When the world is talking ill about us, we have to talk positively about this situation. Not to have something doesn't mean that you are less of a human being. When you don't have it, it's because you have not been given that kind of a thing. Having it, it's still the same. You have been given that kind of a thing. So we are not to be defined by the things that we don't have, but we are to be defined by the content which is in our minds and the things that we are able to bring into life. So I just want to encourage brothers out there. We have a very wonderful group, the Clan of Brothers. We share about our journeys and we really talk about the issues that are in our lives without necessarily being judged. That's a very important thing. That's a very important thing. And also another thing is to find a channel of releasing the emotional hurts that we have. Like Andy put it before, if there is so much pressure that is piling and the pressure continues to pile, there will come a point where you actually explode because there has been no outlet for the anger, the frustration. So find a channel that is suitable for you to release whatever pent up emotions that may be inside of you. So walk tall, be strong. You are still a man, even if you don't have a child. Those are my words.
Wow, thank you. That was pretty powerful. What about you, Rob? What have you got?
Oh, I think there's so much there. I think there's something about look at what your ideals are and actually how many people achieve them. And not everybody, in fact, very few people achieve the ideal. In fact, so few people achieve idealness that it's almost meaningless. So where do you find meaning? I think you find meaning in what you do and how you do that. We were talking about legacy earlier, and perhaps your legacy will be educating the people who are ignorant about what it's like to be somebody who wanted to be a parent and didn't become a parent, or are going through the process of trying to become a parent. And so speaking and educating, I think for men as well, we're in a bit of a double whammy because we fear being vulnerable, and yet society quite often mocks men who are vulnerable. So we're held up to an ideal of not being vulnerable, and yet we are vulnerable. And that's by doing this sort of thing and by education, we can knock down that men aren't vulnerable stereotype, and that makes it easier and better for men and women and everyone if we just realize we're people and we're partial and limited.
Mm. Oh, that was great. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for doing this again. I really appreciate it. And I've learned a lot, and I thought I knew it well. I shouldn't say I knew it all, but I thought I was a fair way down the path of acceptance, and it's really good to listen to you guys and get a different perspective, which I think is something great. And I hope that we are leading by example on that.